Hey guys, it's the tiniest of Logans back with another video for you, and today we're going to be doing a performance review on a game. So we've taken a load of different hardware and graphics cards, and we're going to test it in Forza Horizon 4 to give you guys an idea of the frames per second that you could be getting, and also compare some of the differences between the AA settings and things like low, medium, high, ultra, games maxed out, all of that sort of thing. Now we have been doing this on the website for a while, and this is our first attempt to try and transfer all of this information into a video format, so any feedback is welcomed. So Forza Horizon 4, if you're a car head, you're probably already aware of it. There's a lot of hype around it. It does look like an amazingly pretty game, and when you do get into the nitty-gritty of it, you are going to be astounded with how nice this thing is and how many different things that you can play around with. Now, I don't want to be reviewing the game in that kind of sense. I don't want to be talking to you about the camera features where you can move everything around and kind of like zoom in and zoom out, a bit like Ansel. Although a lot of people have been doing that with static shots, and we've been finding it much more fun to do like really kind of animated shots and smashing the button like mid-drift and then getting a good shot with it that way. So I don't want to be talking about that, and I don't want to be talking about the gameplay. I'm going to try and focus my attention on the actual performance between loads of different graphics cards. And before you worry, we actually do a CPU test where we compare the cores and the ability between Intel and AMD as well. So we have done a lot of graphics cards. We have done AMD cards as well. So there's 580 in there, there's a 380, there's a 56 and a 64 GPU in there as well. And you'll be amazed how well the AMD graphics cards have done. So main test setup is based around an Intel 6850, but we did do one with a 1700X at 4 GHz as well. So there are a lot of there's a lot of hardware that we've gone through with this, and it does take us a fair amount of time to whiz through it as well. So one thing I will say is if you go to the OC3D website, there are many more graphs and stuff available for you to look at, like direct comparisons between AMD and NVIDIA graphics cards head to head on so many different resolutions. It's insane. And loads of different graphical settings, lots more chat as well. Something that you will be able to look at in a lot more detail there as well is kind of the difference between the presets, because we've actually gone through and done lowest, low, medium, high, ultra, and then maxed out, which ultra is a preset, and then maxed out is where you go in and manually smash everything together. And when you look at the difference between some of them, so like lowest looks horrible. It's just, if you need to play it on lowest, please try and save your money, get a better graphics card, or turn the resolution down a little bit. But as you kind of turn the settings up, it does get a lot prettier. And the other thing is what I'm going to show you in a minute as well is it responds really well to the newer architectures, which is something that we're quite enthused about. Also, AMD does very well in this game. Normally with the NVIDIA stuff, there is a fairly big difference between the green and the red team, and AMD really hold their own with this game. But I think that's a lot more down to the game itself, rather than the fact that, you know, I think it's the game has been quite well coded. Anyway, so first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop you up a graph for 4K on the Ultra preset. Now what you can see is we've got the RTX cards in here, and then you can work your way down, but what you can see is that the Vega 64 sits very nicely between the 1080 and the 1080 Ti, and then the 56 does very well as well, sitting in between the 1070 and the 1080. So AMD are quite well held in the game with this one. But like I said, this is 4K in the Ultra preset, so this is going to be stressing the cards quite well. If you flick it down to 1440, the places don't really change that much, but it's the fact that you can actually see the graphical numbers that you're going to be getting. You can see we've got the average here, and then you can see we've got the minimum as well. We've not really gone for the absolute, you know, like peak numbers, because when it comes to gameplay, it's the difference between the average and the minimum that you're going to be most interested in. Again, 1440 at the Ultra preset. Go down to 1080p, graph pops up. These are the sort of numbers that are really going to be for the type of you that out there are either looking for extremely high FPS, or you are playing on one of the lower end cards. And if you look down at the lower end cards, you can see, remembering this is the Ultra preset, you can see that the 380 and the 960 at the bottom still does really well. Now, if you did want to mix in some info for the lower end cards, we've actually done a dedicated lower end card graph that we can bring up just to give you some even more detail there. So you can see the difference between the low, the medium, the high, the ultra, the max, and you can see how well things split into the graphs. And then we did that with the lower end ones, but then we also mixed in a 580 with a 1060 as well to give you a bit of balance. Now, the reason why we didn't do all of these low, medium, high, ultra with the super high-end cards, as you can see that you've got ridiculously high frames rates with them already, and it's going to be more interesting for those of you maybe on a lower budget to talk about or think about the sort of frames per second that you might get if you knock things down a little bit. For example, you might want to be playing at high rather than ultra, just so that you can eke out a few more frames per second and get that average frames per second up, so that you're going to get a more fluid gameplay. The other thing to talk about is when we go over onto the CPU graph, this is actually something that I personally think is quite a positive thing. And we will talk about, you know, kind of the Windows Store experience and stuff a little bit more towards the end. But what you can see here is it does actually respond to more cores and more threads. So you can see with the 2-core, doesn't do quite so well, but you can see with the 4-core and 4-thread, you do get a boost then jumping up to that 4-core 8-thread. It does level out around the 6-core kind of mark, though. You don't really get much of a boost above 6 cores. So this, if you were designing a rig to just play this game, you would know that you, around the kind of 4-core 8-thread, 6-core 12-thread mark is the kind of sweet spot, and you wouldn't necessarily need to go for a fully fledged 8-core rig. So for argument's sake, with a 1700X or maybe new 9th gen processors, which are rumoured, and I have to say that because we're before NDA, to have 8 cores and 16 threads, you're not really going to see a bonus from this, and you might be better off with something like a higher clocked 8700K or a 1700X, for example. Sorry, not a 1700X, a 1600X. You might be better off with a higher clock version of one of those, because all games are going to prefer a higher clock speed. So you could do very well with that. Now, one of the things that we will say is the game is incredibly pretty. It does respond well, very well, to the new architectures. You can see from like the kind of like the Polaris kind of area, when you jump up onto Vega, there's a good jump there. And even with like Pascal, for example, jumping up to the new RTX cards, you can see there's a fairly big leap there as well. But something that we were very impressed with the game was not only the fact that the newer architectures do respond really well to the game, but it was the fact that it is multi-threaded. So it is one of the few games out there that, you know, with all this kind of chase on cores at the moment, it's not just about clock speed, and going up from a 4-core to a 6-core and then adding in more threads as well, the game does do really well. Beyond that kind of 6-core kind of mark is the bit where you're not getting any massive increase in frames per second, but definitely the difference from 2 and 4 cores up to 6, you did get a healthy jump there. So the game does run incredibly well. It's definitely something that you are going to probably fall in love with. I think there's going to be people of you out there that are going to be turning the game up a little bit more than you may have been prepared for. Yes, the Windows Store side of it is a bit of a letdown, and yeah, I know there's going to be people that are going to moan about it and maybe not even buy it. And to be honest with you, for someone that is stopped testing Gears of War, plainly based on the fact that I couldn't swap, because I have to swap rigs quite often, especially when you think about the amount of motherboards that I might be changing for a rig. That side of things was what literally ruined Gears of War for me, because I was constantly trying to get it running. But if you've got this sort of thing on 1 or maybe 2 rigs, it's not too bad. The only thing that we found really annoying is when you take a screenshot, you then have to install another thing on your rig so that you can get access to your screenshots, because every single one of them gets stored on the cloud. The other thing is when you save a pattern on the game, if you put livery on, so I'm lucky enough to have a Mustang, and I've got red stripes on a Mustang, so we obviously replicated it in the game, so the Mustang you see in the game is quite close to what I've got at home. And when we save that skin, it then means that you can share it with everyone. So there's nothing you can keep kind of like to yourself and private. Everything ends up getting shared with everyone, and everything ends up going up to the cloud. So if you save a screenshot, everyone's going to be able to see it. If you save a skin, it's the same thing. By the way, if you look for the red and white Mustang in Forza and you get a GT350R, you can smash the red and white on, and that's the kind of OC 3D version which you've seen popping up in the game. So the long and short of it is, it's a very, very nice game to play. I don't want to go into too much detail about like the fact with the controller it can feel a bit janky, because it doesn't always give you like full lock and stuff, and you have to go in and turn things off. We did want to keep it very much about the game performance. And one thing that you can see is even with older graphics cards like the 960 and the 380, you can get above 30 frames per second as a kind of minimum if you're willing to knock the settings down a little bit below ultra. So if you go down to like high and medium, it is quite well, it can perform quite well. One thing we would say though is we wouldn't really go below like a medium preset on them, because when you do go below that, it does get a little bit too jagged. Low's just not nice. Lowest is horrible. If you need to run it in lowest, we genuinely say get yourself a new phone or a calculator, because that's what you must be playing it on, or get that resolution turned down, just so that you can play it in a smoother environment rather than having it all jaggies and stuff. If you do, and you are able to turn the settings up though, it does look amazing. And once you do start turning the settings up as well, the game, if your card's able to run it, the game does run like butter. It's such a pretty game. You will genuinely love it. Do I think that you need an RTX 280 Ti to run it? No, you definitely don't need that, but at 100 frames per second in 4K, it's with everything going on, with cars being smashed all over the place, or you're jumping off cliffs, you know, anything silly like that where there's loads going on, it is genuinely so pretty. So lots of information. Obviously we've had lots of graphs which you're going to need to pause to be able to see, but you can see that we've covered loads of cards for you. We've done AMD and Nvidia, we've done AMD and Intel, we've compared them all. The only thing that I didn't say before, by the way, is with the CPU graph, what we do is we actually disable cores. So it's the same two CPUs where we literally turn cores off so that we can get those results for you, because then that kind of keeps it fair rather than having to swap CPUs in and out and all that sort of thing. But anyway, Forza Horizon 4 performance test. Now this is like the pilot episode of us trying to do this going forward. Yes, there's been a lot of B-roll. Yes, there's been graphs. Yes, there's been me doing a lot of chatting, but that's probably the best way that we're going to be able to do it. It will evolve, and we will listen to how you think we could evolve it better. Cards are likely to stay relatively the same because we want to be able to do this. We may change certain things with the graphs going forward though. But most importantly is there is actually so much more data and information on the OC3D website. I'd literally urge you to go and have a look at the game review there. The video review is literally just a highlight. So if you're interested in the game and you're interested in how it might perform on your rig, the graphics card side of things specifically, head over to the Overclock 3D website to take a look. But for now at least, this has been the tiniest of Logan's with his first game performance review out. Ding.